All right, we're looking at our textbook, page 33, the section review there. Our textbook, World History for Christian Schools, by Bob Jones University Press. You were to have written these in complete sentences, so when I hear your answer, it should contain enough of the question that it makes sense. And just like before, if you did not write in a complete sentence, put an S out to the side. And remember, we do not start our sentences with pronouns, we start it with nouns so that there's a complete thought in your answer. All right, number one, read to us your answer there. Evan?
The river the Greek historian referred to when he called Egypt the gift of the river was the Nile River.
Very good. That's very complete. Has everything there. Any question? All right, number two. Drew?
The three main periods in ancient Egyptian history are the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom.
That's exactly right. 3 points on that. Easy 3 points. Question?
In the book, it also calls them the age of the pharaohs, the age of the people, and the age of the empire. Is that also a good answer?
Yeah, down in a bottom picture, it does give those nicknames to those. Okay, let's look in the text to find our answers, though. We'll give you credit for that, but from now on, if you don't call it Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom, you will not get credit for it.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to allow you that here, but from now on, the names we will know these three periods by are those three. All right? Let's see. Noelle, did you do page 33? Okay, you need to go out and do that. All right, number 3. Anna. That's right, Tutmosis III was called the Napoleon of Egypt. Everybody, please speak up. Remember, the person who is at home needs to hear you as well. All right, number 4, Daniel.
Pharaohs were the top of the social structure of Egypt.
That is correct, pharaohs. And number 5, Emily.
I don't think I got it right, because I didn't do the correct, like,
You didn't do the right page?
I didn't fill one before.
Well, I think we did that one before, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I did it.
Okay, so if you don't have an assignment done when we start grading it, the time to tell me is before we start. Because once we've started, now we've already gone over the answers, and so that cuts you out from being able to complete the assignment now because we're already giving you the answers. Michael, what's your answer for number 5?
The important discovery that enabled Jean.
No, you had it right. It's a French guy, so it's pronounced as Jean.
That enabled Jean
Okay, what do you think his last name is?
Champlain.
That's close. Anybody have an idea in French how you would say it?
More like Champlain or something.
No, you're mixing the letters around.
Jean Champollion.
Yeah, say that louder for everybody.
Jean Champollion.
Ah, very good. You must have taken French. You must have visited Quebec. Something. Okay. Okay. So now read the rest of the sentence. So for your answer there.
That enabled Jean Champollion to read hieroglyphics was the symbol called the cartouche.
No, cartouche is a symbol, but that's not what enabled him to read
on the Rosetta Stone.
on the Rosetta Stone. Okay, we'll let you have it because you did include the answer there finally. The Rosetta Stone is what enabled him to read hieroglyphics. Cartouche was just simply one symbol among many. All right, the Rosetta Stone. Any questions? All right, there's 7 possible points on this page as well. So count up how many you had off. Put the minus, however many it is at the top. Circle it. And pass it to the people that are in front of you. And then from there, pass them to Joel, and Joel will lay them on my desk. And Michael, would you turn off the lights, please? And thus begins our adventure to ancient Egypt. This will be an exciting adventure, I think, because there is so much that takes place in ancient Egypt that's interesting, for one thing, but another thing is that there's so much that takes place in ancient Egypt that relates to the Bible and events that the Bible, people in the Bible are a part of as well. All right, so in your notes, we're ready to go looking at ancient Egypt. But would somebody get Noel, please? She's going for this. All right, ancient Egypt. When we look at ancient Egypt, we begin with what's called the Archaic period. Archaic means very old. So this is before the kingdom periods. So Archaic period, there is no kingdom yet. This is prior to any kingdom. But it's the time when people began settling in Egypt, following the flood and following the confusion of the Tower of Babel. People spread out, and some descendants of Ham and Mizraim came to Egypt. So this is the Archaic period. Why did they settle in Egypt? Well, what is it that draws people to any area to live? Before modern times, it's the presence of what? Water. You got to have water to live, right? Not only to drink, but also to grow crops. And so the Nile River is what drew people there to live in Egypt. So the Nile River is very important. In fact, the Nile River is so important that the picture in hieroglyphics for going north is pictured as a boat without a sail. And go south is a boat with a sail. So what does that tell you? If going north is a boat without a sail, what does that tell you?
I think I read in the textbook that the current carried them north.
Yeah, the current flows north because what direction does the Nile River flow? See the Nile River here. We can't see the delta. Let's look at this map. From what direction to what direction does the Nile River flow? Well,
From south to north.
yeah, from south to north. It goes that way because it empties out into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, we have a tendency when we look at a map to think everything goes south because that's downhill. But is it downhill from in Egypt? No, downhill is going this direction. So a boat going that direction wouldn't need sails. You just go with the current. So going north is a boat without sails. But if you're going to go this way, if you're going to go south, you need to have sails. Does that make sense, everybody? So the Nile River is so important that even directions come from an understanding of what happens in the Nile. Now, because of what happens with the Nile River, there are 3 seasons in Egypt. The first season is called flooding season, and that's from June to September. So that's the time of year when the Nile River overflows its banks and spreads out over quite a ways. And it was amazing to me when I was in Egypt to see the depth at which the Nile River flooded. Because as we visited some temples and things that were along the Nile or near the Nile and heard at what level the river was, the river was quite deep for quite a ways. So when it overflowed, it wasn't like just a little flood. It was very deep for a long distance. And that was important then, though, for the people living in Egypt. Flooding took place June to September, so that flooding is there, all that water is there, and then it recedes. And once the water recedes, then they can begin planting. So planting season was October to February. One of the things that the Nile River did for them, which made it a good place to plant crops, is that when the river overflowed, and it overflowed because of all the water coming from the mountains, from the snow in the mountains melting, and the rain in the mountains, and as the water all came from the mountains down into the river, so that the river flooded, it brought with it a lot of topsoil and minerals from up in the mountains. So when the flood waters receded, it left behind good new soil. So every year, they didn't have to worry about crop rotation and things like that. They had new soil every year to plant their crops in. And so once the flood waters receded, they could plant their crops. And then, of course, once you plant crops, what's the next thing? Harvest. So the next season is called harvest season, and that's from March to May. Any questions about the seasons of Egypt along the Nile? One of the sad things is that doesn't happen anymore. Because now there's a dam called the Aswan Dam that was built to control the flooding and also to provide hydroelectricity to Egypt. I think it was built back in the 50s or maybe early 60s. So there's no more flooding. And so Egypt has had to change from being a crop-based country to looking to other sources of revenue, and primarily it's tourists, because it no longer floods the banks. I want to show you a couple of pictures that I took along the Nile, so you can see what it's like there. There's a boat with a sail along the Nile River. You can see that there are little islands here and there. It's relatively wide. We were able to take a small cruise ship up the Nile for about 3 days. There you can see water buffalo. I want you to notice here that you have green plants, trees back to here. After that, it's mountainous and dry. But even where it's not mountainous, it's dry. If you ever see a picture of the Nile River with showing a topographical look at it, you'll see that it's green all along the Nile. And I always wondered about that. Is that really the way it is? It is. If you look at this map right here, you can see that it's green along the edge, and then up here it's not. That's it. There are some places when you're going along the Nile, you look out there, and it may only be green for a couple hundred yards, maybe a mile, but after that, it's almost like there's a dividing line, and there it's just dirt. It's dry. So the Nile provides moisture for along the Nile, but beyond that, there's not enough rain to sustain anything growing. In fact, when we flew into Cairo, one of the things that amazed us flying in, looking down at the city, is that the whole city was brown from the dirt, from the sand blowing in from the desert to the west of the city. Everything was brown. And at first I thought, well, maybe they just make their houses brown because that's what the materials are made out of or something. But and from our hotel room, I could see that some people, maybe in their apartment or whatever, used water and washed off the area where they're living, and it's not brown underneath. There was some color there. But there's so much dirt blowing in all the time, so much sand, I should say, that everything is brown. Very close by. Here's a picture taken at sunset on the Nile. I think my wife might have taken that picture. See some of the vegetation growing along the Nile there. A couple people in a boat. There's some people gathering up some kind of plant, like I'm not sure what it is, something that they found useful. See the animal camouflaged in the shade there? Donkey. All right, when we talk about the Nile, we talk about ancient Egypt. Egypt is referred to as being divided into two sections for a long time. There's Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Now, which way is Upper Egypt and which way is Lower Egypt?
Upper Egypt is to the south
And why is that?
because the river flows from south to north. So, in a way, their directions are completely flipped what we think.
Yeah, from what we look on a map, we would think, oh, upper, that's this way. No, because upper is the higher elevation where the water comes from, or the river comes from. And so upper Egypt is the south of Egypt. Lower Egypt is to the north. That may seem counterintuitive to you, but because of the topography of the land, that's what it is. So we have Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and that's how they existed for many, many years. From the earliest times, the inhabitants of Africa, including Egyptians, which in the Bible are the descendants of Mizraim, sometimes Egypt is even called Mizraim, and the Ethiopians who live south of Mizraim, or what the Bible calls Cush, were dark-skinned. These are black people that lived in ancient Egypt and Ethiopia. In fact, Cush is a Hebrew word which means black. Ethiopia is a Greek word meaning a man with a sunburned or black face. Mizraim means children of the sun. Visiting Egypt about AD 500, the Greek historian Herodotus stated that, quote, "It is certain the natives of the countries are black with heat, that they are black-skinned and have woolly hair," unquote. Someone else has pointed out that a melanin test was taken from the skin of an Egyptian mummy. The melanin proved the Egyptian was black. Now, I point that out to you because generally when we think about Egypt, ancient Egypt, we picture light-skinned people. If you watch movies about ancient Egypt, you see light-skinned people, but that's not the case. The native Egyptians were black people, all right? You need to give them credit for who they really are. Now, around 3000 BC, a man by the name of Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. After he made this unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, he changed his name to Narmer. So sometimes you'll hear him called Menes, and sometimes Narmer. It's the same person. And he begins the first dynasty. A dynasty is simply a family that rules a nation. So as the ruling authority passes from father to son to son to son, that's a dynasty until somebody interrupts it and somebody else takes over, and that's another dynasty. So this is the first dynasty of Egypt. He takes for himself the name Pharaoh, which means great house. House, of course, refers to his family. So the word Pharaoh we find back in this area. And we also have the term vizier, or at least a designation of what that person does. The vizier is the overseer of all works of the king. He's the one that's in charge of really carrying out the king's orders, of running the country for the king. And we will see that come into play later on. Menes, or Narmer, reigned for 62 years. And you know how he died? He was carried off by a hippo. Do you know that in Africa, even today, the #1 killer animal killing people are hippos? Not lions, not even crocodiles. It's hippos. It's the hippos you got to watch out for. That's how he died. This is a picture of what's called the Palette of Narmer. It's located in the museum in Cairo. This is how it appears now as you look at it. Here's a colorized version so that you can see it more clearly. So, and there are two sides. We'll look at the one side at a time. All right, so this is Narmer, or Menes. What is he doing? What's this picture showing? Come on, simple picture. What's it showing? Joel?
Is he beating someone?
Either that or he's giving him a hairstyle. That's your only two choices, right? He's either a hair designer, cosmopolitan,
Cosmetologist.
a barber, or he's killing him. What do you think? Yeah, he's killing him. He's got a club here. He's killing this guy. All right, what else do you see on this picture? What about these down here? What do they look like?
When they run away with his dad.
They're dead. They're laying there dead. All right, so symbolic of those that he's killed. All right, he's wearing a white crown, which is the crown of Upper Egypt. See, this is a hawk. The hawk represents the king himself, and he's holding an enemy. This is an enemy. He's holding him by a ring nose. And he sits on 6 flowers. That represents 6,000 people, the number of prisoners taken. Behind the Pharaoh is his sandal bearer. I'd like to have somebody following around just carrying your shoes. At the top, we have 2 cow heads. These are the heads of Hathor, the god, who is flanking the king's name. The king's name is in here. And his name, we call him an armor, but it literally is made up of a catfish and a chisel. Okay, the 2 men down here have the sign town right there, and the name of the town is Rosette. All right, on the opposite side, and this is not colorized, but I think you can see it clearly enough to compare the 2. We have the triumphant king in armor wearing the red crown. So here, this is a red crown, which is the symbol of Lower Egypt. Before him are his standard bearers and 2 rows of enemies. What do you notice about these rows of enemies? Nobody notices anything about them? They have no heads. Where are their heads? Down here, between their legs. Pretty graphic picture of what he does to his enemies, right? There are 2, what they call, all the scholars call mythological animals in the middle, which symbolize the reconciliation of Upper and Lower Egypt. But I would contend, but we see the symbol a lot in different places. I don't think these are mythological creatures. I think these are creatures that they had seen. There's nothing else mythological anywhere around. So these 2 guys look like they are in control or holding these back, and the next being intertwined indicates Upper and Lower Egypt are being united. At the bottom, here's a bull, which represents the king, and it is destroying a fortress. And here's one of the enemies of that fortress, captured fortress. All right, and we've got the 2 cow heads of Hathor up here. All right, so this is not a large piece. I'm trying to remember about how big it was. It easily fit in a glass case about like that, and so it was, maybe about that big, as a guess. Now they're just building a new museum in Cairo, and I trust it's going to be a lot better. The museum we went to that had this in it, had the treasures of King Tut, all this great ancient Egyptian stuff, and the place was as dirty inside as it was outside. Dust all over everything. It didn't look like they took care of it. Some things didn't even have a sign on them. And everywhere in Egypt, you have to pay to use the restroom. Now, you can imagine if you go to a museum in this country, they have nice restrooms, right? There, it's a dirty restroom, and you have to pay them 10 pounds just to use it. And if you're lucky, they might give you a single square of tissue paper to use, should you need it, because there's no toilet paper in there. All right, so doesn't not exactly fit into what we consider civilized in our Western culture. All right, here's another picture showing Pharaoh and his wife. Here are the different crowns: the red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt. Medes put these together, and so after that, pharaohs had a combination of the two crowns, a double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. And then here are some other crowns that they might wear from time to time, and you can see how they dressed as well. Hieroglyphics is something that I'm sure you've heard about. It's the way that they wrote. We might call it picture writing. Everything is done with pictures. And this is an example of hieroglyphics just on a page. Here, this is an actual photograph of a wall. You find if you go into the tombs or into the temples that there's hieroglyphics all over the place. They didn't waste any space. Now the thing with hieroglyphics, it's not only is it picture writing, but it also can change direction. And you have to know what the symbols mean in order to know what direction you're reading. So, for example, we read left to right. The Hebrew goes what? Right to left. Hieroglyphics might go anyway. So, for example, it might be starting here, and I'm going to turn around and go back this way, back and forth. This might be going down, or it might be going up. You have to understand things in order to tell which way to go. Now, you probably could pick out some things in hieroglyphics like that. Can you tell what that is? What?
A beetle.
Yeah, or called a scarab. Or those of you that Mrs. Henry in first grade, remember what the scarab is? A dung beetle, right? And you can see some different birds, waterfowl. So they use pictures to communicate. If you would like to find out what your name looks like in hieroglyphics, you can go to that website. And if it's not functioning, you just Google my name in hieroglyphics. You can find something. And you might find it interesting. I'll bring in a picture on Monday that we bought on papyrus that has my name and my wife's name in hieroglyphic writing. So you'll be able to see that. Here's a temple at Karnak, famous temple that was used for many hundreds of years. Every time a new pharaoh, a new ruler came in, they would build another part onto it. But you can see the hieroglyphics written all over these columns. At one time there was a roof. It's long gone. But I wanted you to see the hieroglyphics that are all around. See, some of it's worn away, but a lot of it is still intact. Here's a hieroglyphic that shows Pharaoh being baptized with Nile water. So here are a couple servants pouring Nile water on top of him in preparation to enter the temple of Horus. So they had a form of baptism for the Pharaoh. And then here's a messenger God giving a scroll to Pharaoh. See the scroll here. So there are pictures all over the place, either reenacting events or communicating an event, or they're writing. You see all the hieroglyphics there. Here are some more. So everywhere you look, there's hieroglyphics. This is at the Edfu temple. This is, I think, the same. I think this is baptism of the Pharaoh. You can see God there, and just the writing that's all over. This is our Egyptian guide, Medu. He was a delight. He was something very unusual among guides in Egypt. He was a Christian. And he had his master's degree in ancient Egyptology. So he could read the hieroglyphics. How many guides are there like that? He was wanting to work on his PhD in integrating the Bible with ancient Egyptian history. I thought, yes, I'm interested in that too. And I was very pleased to find that many of the conclusions he came to concerning ancient Egyptian history and where the Bible fits in were the same as what I had come to. I was afraid that he would contradict everything I had been working on for years and I would have to start all over again. But we were in agreement, and I was glad to hear that from a source that really had studied it a lot. All right, so that's Medu. We'll mention him other times. But again, you can see the hieroglyphics behind him. Can you tell what that is? It's kind of hard. No, you're close. Look at the snout here. A crocodile, yeah. And so this is a crocodile on an altar, we actually went to a temple that was dedicated to the crocodile god, and they mummified the crocodile, and they always kept crocodiles in this place outside the temple. This is a calendar. And I did not write down what it meant because I thought I'll remember that. I didn't. I think these are the months over here, and these are the days, but I don't remember for sure. But calendar was in picture writing too. This is a birthing stool. What's a birthing stool? It's a stool upon which you give birth. Egyptian women did not lay in a bed in a hospital to give birth. They sat on a stool to give birth. And that's a drawing of it. This is the god Bes here. He looks kind of like a dwarf or something. But he is the god of that oversees women when they're giving birth. This is outside of the temple. All right, let's talk about something else that was very important to the Egyptians, and that is getting water from the Nile to their fields. And it looks like we are out of time to do that. So we'll pick up there tomorrow. For Monday, I want you to read Genesis 1 through 11. Read the first 11 chapters of Genesis. Some of you have read that before. Let's read it again, and then we'll talk about what you have seen there on Monday. Any questions?